This week's episode of our show has been sponsored by Questonomicon, a collection of quests for 5th edition coming soon to Kickstarter.
Our friend Jacob over at XP to Level 3 wants in on some of that Kickstarter action, so he is making a compendium of adventures for 5th edition.
Jacob's videos on YouTube are always funny and entertaining, so I'm sure we can look forward to more of that in the adventures he's putting out for 5e.
So follow the links in the description below and keep your eyes peeled to XP to Level 3 and on Kickstarter for this upcoming project. And now, onto this week's episode.
Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything D&D, including advice for players and guides for DMs.
We upload new videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
This is part 3 of our subclass tier rankings for the Warlock in D&D 5e, where we are taking a look at the 2 new Warlock patrons that were introduced in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, the Fathomless and the Genie.
Up on screen right now, you're going to see the criteria that we use to rank the subclasses. We are pitting the subclasses against each other and not those of other classes. We may talk a little bit about multi-classing or the flavor and roleplay potential, but those are not core mechanics that we're looking at in our rankings.
When we do rank the subclasses, though, we consider how the subclass augments the base features of the class in all pillars of play. More than just combat, we look at how it can create opportunities for problem solving, for exploration, for social interactions, and all the sorts of trouble that warlocks can get themselves into.
There's a lot to discuss today, so let's get rolling.
The first new otherworldly patron that we're taking a look at today comes from the otherworldly depths deep below the sea, an antediluvian horror from a bygone age that lurks beneath the waves. The Fathomless is very interesting to me because I think that it has a similar origin as the Great Old One, but it really emphasizes, I think, the aquatic nature of many of that kind of Lovecraftian horror that is associated with entities like Dagon and Cthulhu. Really, if you want to have your Shadows over Innsmouth inspired Warlock patron, I think this is your ticket here.
I think you can also lean into some vibes that relate it to something like a Kraken entity, like a Kraken god, or the great depths of the sea. There's a lot of tentacle horror that is being brought to life here with the Fathomless. So there's a lot of really cool directions, and it feels less cosmic and spacey and more like the unknown depths of the trenches of the sea.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting kind of spin because I think prior to the introduction of the Fathomless, if you did want to have more Cthulhu, Dagon-esque character, you would probably have gone to the old one for flavor-wise. But let's see what the actual mechanics here are. Like every Warlock patron, it's going to give you an expanded spell list of new spells right away when you choose your patron that you can pick as your Warlock levels up. Again, unlike Cleric Domains, the Warlock spells are not automatically granted to you. You still have to choose them as you level up. But this is a pretty sweet spell list.
What I will say is, right off the bat, when you look at this spell list, I would pick most of these. I think that there's some great standouts here. You get classics like Thunder Wave, Silence, Bigby's Hand, Control Water. There's Sleet Storm is another great one. I think almost every spell on this list is actually pretty substantial.
There's a really great combination of battlefield control, direct damage, and utility spells on this list. Control Water is a really tricky spell, and we have seen it do amazing things in our own campaigns that are just not what you would expect for this kind of spell. Bigby's Hand on the surface is a battlefield control spell, but it has a lot of great non-combat applications if you get creative with it. Obviously, Lightning Bolt, Sleet Storm, Raw Power, Gust of Wind, and Silence can be used in many creative ways, and you've also got Create and Destroy Water on there too. I think this is a 10 out of 10 spell list.
Absolutely. I think just for little flavor text here, I love that Bigby's Hand has in the brackets that it appears as a watery tentacle.
Yes.
That's so cool. Speaking of tentacles, which seems to be the theme of this entire Warlock, at first level as well, you gain Tentacle of the Deep. This kind of reminds me of Spiritual Weapon in a way, but without using a spell slot. As a bonus action, you can summon a tentacle that also as a bonus action, you can move around the battlefield and smack people in the face with your tentacle for 1d8 damage, which goes up to 2d8 damage at level 10. So This use of your bonus action to just slap people around with a tentacle on top of your normal spell casting and Eldritch Blasts and whatever else you're doing as a Warlock is a really handy use of your bonus action, I think, and a really valuable way to just add a little bit of extra damage onto the battlefield and put something else out there that is a nuisance for your enemies.
Yeah, you can get a little bit of extra damage with this because, well, it is a bonus action to set it up, and thus it kind of gives you a bit of a traffic jam for bonus actions with things like Hex. You can use this together with Hex. So once you have Hex and this rolling, you're going to get the extra damage from that on top of it. It also reduces the movement speed of people that it hits. And you can move it around. It's got a pretty good range to it. I think this is a decent extra damage ability, and the fact that it is keyed off your proficiency modifier for the number of times you can use it means that you've got a lot of flexibility there, especially for Warlocks who are so limited on the number of spell slots they have.
Continuing first level abilities, we get another feature called Gift of the Sea. This allows you to now breathe underwater, and you have a swimming speed of 40 feet. For me, this ability might be niche, but in the right campaign, might be an all-star ability.
I think that a lot of players neglect how, with spells like water breathing, being ritual spells, it's very easy to get underwater, but you still don't have a swim speed. And when you don't have a swim speed, even when you can breathe underwater, it's still dangerous to fight there. I find as a DM, I love water hazards. I love aquatic monsters. I love things like black dragons that are as comfortable in the water as they are in the air. And so I think that this can be clutch.
I've also seen great use of the spell Control Water, where you can just flood an entire chamber. And when you can do that and grant yourself a breathing and swim speed, there's a lot of situations where the combination of your watery spells with this ability means that you get to create the scenarios with this Warlock where you're going to excel.
The only issue that I do take with it, it is free. But we have seen in our other campaigns with Warlocks, there is an invocation that gives you a swim speed and the ability to breathe underwater. So it's nice that you kind of get that invocation for free because invocations are a pretty limited resource. Any Warlock that is in a campaign where water features are common could take that invocation with a different subclass.
Definitely so far this is the ribbon feature, but I still think it's a very practical and useful ribbon feature. Continuing with ribbon features, at 6th level we gain Oceanic Soul, which now allows you the ability to speak underwater, so you can speak normally, and you also have resistance to cold damage. Again, this one feels like it's a little bit of a niche ability. Luckily, you're gaining multiple first level and multiple 6th level abilities. Still could be useful. I am getting a very Aquaman vibe from this one.
Yeah. Next up, we're also going to get the Guardian Coil, which also comes online at level 6. This allows you to use your tentacle to intercede on an attack and reduce the damage by 1d8 or 2d8 starting at 10th level. This does use your reaction to do this. It's a little bit of damage prevented. Overall, I find that abilities that reduce damage are not as useful as ones that either impose disadvantage on that attack in the first place or increase AC, but I'll take it.
At 10th level, you're going to gain Grasping Tentacles. This interesting ability grants you Evard's Black Tentacles as a spell, but it doesn't count against your total spells known, and you can cast it once per day without using a spell slot. Interestingly enough, although the spell requires concentration, your concentration on the spell can't be broken by receiving damage. On top of that, you also gain temporary hit points when you cast the spell.
At level 14, you gain the Fathomless Plunge power. This allows you to teleport yourself and up to 5 willing creatures that you can see within 30 feet of you to any body of water that you have seen that is within 1 mile of your current location. You all appear within that body of water. It has to be at least the size of a pond, which isn't very specific, but I guess it is more specific and bigger than a puddle. But what constitutes a pond, I'm not entirely certain.
I think as a DM, I would rule that a pond is a body of water that you yourself could fit into.
I assume so, but like, is a 10-foot wide pond sufficient?
I would say sure.
Okay. Ask your DM about that one. It seems a little vague, but this is a cool way to escape, basically, or potentially infiltrate, because you have to have seen the body of water at least once before. It does mean that you are limited in exactly where you can go. But it's pretty flexible. It's 1 mile. It's a group teleportation. It is as an action. And you get the ability to do it again on a short rest. I definitely think that this leans more into the utility side of things.
So when I look at subclasses, my number one thing is I take into account the flavor and imagery that is being projected here. My question then becomes, do the abilities add to that image that they're trying to portray in meaningful and potent ways that I think will play out well in the game? I thought that the Fathomless was a weaker subclass than I think it actually is. I thought on my first glances, I was like, this isn't that great. But reading through it, sort of imagining the characters I could create with it, I actually think I like it more than I thought I did. And I think the abilities are great.
Yeah, I think the Fathomless Warlock has a banger spell list.
Yes.
It has some cool abilities. It doesn't have anything that is jaw-dropping. That's I think, the thing about it. But I think the combined package here is really good. And I think it is at least on par. I think it's better than the Great Old One.
I would pick this above the Great Old One. I would probably pick this above the Archfey.
Me too. So we gave the Archfey an A. And the Archfey is pretty good. I'm not entirely certain it's better than the Archfey. I think the Archfey has some interesting abilities that are very different.
Yes.
But I do think it's on the same level. I think that you can make the case for playing either. I'm happy to give this an A. What do you think?
I absolutely think this deserves an A. It was riding that line for me, but even the ribbon features, I feel like if you're in a nautical campaign, this is S tier.
Yeah.
If you are not in a nautical campaign, there's still enough water features in almost any campaign, plus a spell list that encourages you to create water features or amplify water features that you find in the environments. I've never really gone into an environment in a campaign where there's not some form of water somewhere. And if there isn't, you have create water as a spell.
Yeah.
So you can create water and then do your shenanigans with it. I really think that there's a lot to play with here. I think that it really amplifies the theme and the image of this Fathomless Warlock, and I think that it's going to excel at what it wants to do, even in a campaign that is very far away from nautical themes. I think this is still a great Warlock, which is why I don't want to give it a B. Because a B, to me, my first thought was, if there's no water, if you're not on a ship, if you're not doing that, it's not going to be useful.
I don't think that's the case at all. I don't think you are dependent because, again, the spell list is that good.
Yeah.
And the tentacle works anywhere. It's a cute little feature that you'll use quite regularly. I think probably cold damage is more common than psychic damage as far as a resistance goes. Nothing here blows my mind.
No.
But nothing here is bad by any measure either. And everything is useful, good, worth using. Lots of situations where it's useful. Absolutely. If you don't want to be a Hexblade or a Fiend Warlock, you want something that's got a different flavor and more classic, I think, Warlock playstyle, I think you've got your ticket here.
Absolutely. I think that it is a far stretch away from an S tier because, again, there's nothing here that made me go, oh my God, this is so amazing. But everything here is strong. Mm-hmm. And everything here, I think, is useful. The ribbon, there's 2 ribbon abilities, but they also come online at the same time that you're getting other, much more useful abilities. Yeah. And I think that's important as well.
But even the ribbons aren't useless. Your wishes, though, might be fulfilled with our next otherworldly patron, which is the Genie. In the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, there are 4 types of genies, which each correspond to the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. And so when you choose your Genie patron, you have to choose which type of those 4 genies is your otherworldly patron. You also get a cool bottle as well. So there's a couple kind of fun choices of what kind of genie do you follow here and what kind of vessel does your genie is it. It's not clear to me whether the genie lives in the bottle with you. That would be really cool if that was the case. I would totally flavor that if I had a player that did. But what's interesting about this choice, though, is that the Genie patron has a bit of a split expanded spell list because there's 1 spell of every level that all Genie Warlocks get up to level 5, but then they also get Wish. Mm-hmm. And then You also get a spell of level 1 to 5 that is chosen based on the type of genie you have.
And I will say that some of the Genie spell lists are a little bit better than others. But I do feel that with the automatically included spells and the inclusion of Wish, really whatever Genie you pick and whatever bottle you pick, you ain't never had a friend like this Genie.
Absolutely. I do think that the Jinn and the Ifrit, I think, are a little bit better for the spell list.
Yes.
But I think that there's a case to be made for any of them. And they have some influences on your other abilities, like the resistances and damage types here and there. But I think that you got a winner in any of these, and absolutely adding Wish to the Warlock spell list alone is a big, big change, and really makes, I think, changes how Warlocks play at very high levels.
Yeah, and I do think that adding Wish already makes this spell list, even if you're picking, in my opinion, my least favorite is the Dao. But the spell list is still relatively good. And again, no matter what, you're getting Wish, and you're getting some pretty key spells in here.
That said, of course, you gotta wait for 17 levels to get your wishes fulfilled. But, hey, you get there eventually.
You got to serve your time with the Genie before the Genie will grant you wishes, which kind of goes against the moral code of most Genies, but hey, why not?
You also get the Genie's vessel. And so this can take the shape of an object that has some sort of compartment into it. It can be anything from a classic lamp to a bottle to even a ring with a hidden compartment in it. And you can use this as your spellcasting focus, but you can also spend an action to jump inside it, in which case you get this extra dimensional space that is 20 feet by 20 feet that is filled with tables and pillows that you can hang out in for a number of hours equal to twice your proficiency modifier.
As well as this, when you are touching the Genie vessel in some capacity, when you hit a creature with a attack on your turn, you can deal your proficiency bonus in additional damage to the target.
So hopping in a bottle is pretty interesting here. It's almost like a bag of holding. You can only hop inside it once per long rest. Like hop in, then hop out. And you're going to have to get to a proficiency modifier of +4, which is about mid-levels, before you could actually take a long rest inside there. But I feel like there's shenanigans.
Yeah, there's some play here, and we're going to see actually at higher levels the shenanigan play gets even higher. But there are reasons why hiding in a ring or a talisman or a bottle might be really, really useful. If you need to hide, then if you're an unsuspecting ring laying on the ground, nobody's really going to look for you. I also think, although it might be tricky, there's some infiltration techniques that could be really useful here.
Yeah, and there's something about the fact that your Genie's vessel could be a ring that you can wear on your finger, which means you're always touching it, which means that you can kind of just zip inside this ring. Your vessel can be destroyed, which ejects you and any objects you brought inside it. The other thing, though, that's weird here is there's no weight limit to what you can put in there.
Yeah.
And it's not clear how you bring other objects in there. Like, if I am holding my Genie vessel and I'm holding a table, can I bring that table into my vessel? Like, what defines the limit of what I can bring in there? That's not really specified in the text. So again, these are questions for the Dungeon Master, because there's, you could just sweep up a whole bunch of treasure and start using this almost like a bag of holding.
Just like funneling treasure, putting it all in your pockets, going inside your ring, unloading, going out.
Yeah, because like a bag of holding has a weight limit.
Yeah.
But this doesn't. And this is a 20 foot by 20 foot space. So it's much larger than a bag of holding too.
I feel like there's a lot of shenanigans here, and you will probably want to talk to your DM about the limit of the shenanigans.
And hopping out of it is a bonus action.
Yeah.
Which means that when you hop out, you still have your action to do more shenanigans when you suddenly appear out of nowhere. Well, not really out of nowhere. You're appearing out of the ring or the bottle. But you could surprise people with this.
Yeah. At 6th level, you're going to gain Elemental Gift. Depending on the type of Genie you picked, you're now going to gain a damage resistance that corresponds with the element of the Genie. But on top of that, you're going to gain a ability to use a flying speed of 30 feet for 10 minutes a number of times equal to your proficiency modifier. This flight doesn't require concentration, so you basically have all the flight I think you would need for most scenarios.
Yeah, and this is activated. You activate this flight as a bonus action. So you've got all that you need for combat right there. It lasts for 10 minutes, but you also have all the applications that this brings for problem solving, exploration, and any sort of thing else. Concentration-free flight is super powerful. And the fact that you can do this several times per day for 10 minutes, activated as a bonus action, is really sweet. Like, let's just put it this way. A flying Warlock throwing down Hex and Eldritch Blast on its own.
Yeah. Adding flight to anybody who has ranged combat potential, which Warlocks excel at because of Eldritch Blast, and you can take some invocations. Like if you take the invocation that allows you to double your range on Eldritch Blast, you could be soaring high, sniping people.
And you get hover as part of this as well. And so a flying creature that can hover is a little bit more resistant to the things that knock flying creatures out of the sky as well. So that's really, really clutch here too.
At 10th level, you're going to gain Sanctuary Vessel. So now the little genie bottle that you can go inside of gets even better. You can now bring up to 5 willing creatures with you, which is going to be most party sizes. So your whole party can go on in there. And if they stay in there for 10 minutes at least, or longer, they get the benefits of a short rest. And any hit dice that they use on that short rest, you get to add your proficiency bonus to those dice rolls. So now you have a little healing vessel.
Yeah, and I think the biggest benefit, of course, is for you. Because Warlocks are a class that wants to be able to take short rests. And there's going to be a lot of circumstances in adventures where spending an hour on a short rest is difficult, but spending 10 minutes is not. I can imagine a scenario where you as a Warlock need that 10-minute short rest, but your party members don't. So you go into your bottle, and your party members run through the dungeon or travel, because normally you can't move around during a short rest.
Yeah.
So you can just sit in your bottle and get carried by a party member for 10 minutes while you take your short rest that you need to get your Warlock spell slots back. And the party just continues on whatever business that they need to do. They didn't have to stop for a full hour. They didn't have to stop at all.
Imagine that you're in a party where you're the Warlock, you have a fighter, a monk, and a rogue. And you need to infiltrate into somewhere. Well, the fighter might drag down your whole infiltration plan because they're wearing heavy armor. So you, the fighter, and the monk, who all gain a lot by taking a short rest, go inside of your vessel, which, let's pretend it's the ring. The rogue puts the ring on, sneaks into where you need to get to. You pop out ready to go because now you, the fighter, and the monk have all benefited from a short rest.
Yep.
These are the types of things that you can really think about with this use and really change gameplay in really important ways.
And it's worth noting that by this level, your proficiency modifier is now +4, which means that you now have a place that your party could take a long rest inside if you had to. You can't leave your party members in there because, unfortunately, if you exit the bottle, they have to come out as well. And if you die, they get released. So you can't trap people in here either. It is pretty carefully worded to avoid those kind of like trapping scenarios. But when you're collaborating, there's a lot of tricky things you could do with this.
Yeah. And at 14th level, you're going to gain Limited Wish. As an action, you can request from your genie the effects of a spell that is 6th level or lower. Casting this spell now requires no material components, and it must have a casting time of 1 action or less. So you can't do any of those 10-minute or 1-hour spells.
No contingency, unfortunately. Yeah.
But there's still a lot that you can do with this. And the fact that it even says you don't need costly material components. So you get to forego any costly material components. It does replenish on 1d4 long rests. So you do have a chance that this could be an option that you're only using once every 4 days. But it is a dice roll, so it could be every other day, it could be every day. Really depends on how that dice works for you. That does make it a little bit more limited, but seeing as Warlocks only get one 6th level spell, the ability to basically say you get a second one and it can be anything from any spell list up to an extent of casting time is pretty powerful.
There's a lot of creative play that you could do here, whether it is to nab your favorite wizard spell that you don't get. Need a Wall of Force? There you go. This is very flexible too because it allows you to patch holes that you might have. Like, if your cleric died, you can now be the one that casts Raise Dead, and you don't even need the diamond for it.
Yeah.
You can pull things out like Greater Respiration, any of those emergency spells that are very difficult to justify picking with when you've got limited spell slots and limited spells known, but that you might need it. And yes, if you need to use this aggressively in combat, yeah, pull out Chain Lightning or Mass Suggestion or something super powerful from another class spell list. There's a lot of options that are there. I think this is a great feature. It does suck that you can only use it once every 1d4 days. That feels like a very arbitrary limitation that, in my opinion, doesn't feel necessary.
I mean, you are already getting a flying Warlock with pretty decent spell lists and a cool capsule that they can go into, so maybe the Limited Wish. I will also say, with the Limited Wish, the reason why this might be so powerful that it needs that limitation is you don't have to choose the spell until the moment. So you're looking for a situation. This is actually where it pays to have a really good idea on some of the options available. You might want to make a little cheat sheet with some of your favorite options to rely on, so that if a moment presents itself where you know a certain spell could save the day, end the combat, or win the victory of the whole adventure that you're on, now's the time to use this ability. So it could be potentially one of the most powerful abilities you gain, which I think is why it has that limitation.
Fair enough. Overall, I think the Genie is a really strong subclass.
Yeah.
It's a very impressive spell list with different options within that. And so even that path of like, which Genie are you going to pick, that flexibility pays dividends. But then we are adding Limited Wish and Wish to the Warlock spell list. We're getting a fly speed. Mm-hmm. And we're getting all the shenanigans that we can do with the vessel. This is definitely high A for me. Is it possibly an S tier?
This is where the discussion comes in. I am also riding this line right now. The reason why I'm riding the line, like, it's so close to being an S tier. But the shenanigans you can pull off with the bottle, the example I gave with the rogue wearing the ring, mm-hmm. that's key. If you wanted to get your whole party into the ring and somehow get it somewhere, that becomes a little more difficult. There are limitations here, but gaining a short rest on a Warlock is key. Gaining a flying speed is key.
Yeah.
There are some abilities, like the limitations of Limited Wish is limiting.
This is actually a Warlock that you don't want to multi-class.
Yes.
Like, this is one of the few patrons where I think you absolutely don't necessarily want to dip into this. Although, maybe... No, actually, I think it's pretty good to dip into it. Like, the Vessel alone is a kind of cool dip.
Yeah.
But I think that it is a Warlock subclass where you are really rewarded for going all the way with it. And, yeah, man. We can't escape the fact that concentration free flight at level 6 a number of times per day equal to your proficiency modifier is amazing for a Warlock.
Yeah, and with a Warlock, choosing the right invocations and kind of being that blaster on the battlefield, which Warlocks excel at, mm-hmm. having flight on top of that makes you a really powerful character. And if you chose the Djinn as your option, you get greater invisibility. So flying and greater invisibility... not to mention this you really pointed out I was thinking of the shenanigans of the vessel and not the short rest capabilities, but you are right, and you brought it up that Warlock's getting a short rest in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And if you have a fighter in your party, if you have a monk, if you have a rogue, there's a lot of characters who benefit really well from a short rest.
Yeah, and there was a spell that was introduced called Catnap that did give you a 10-minute short rest, but that costs you a spell slot to do it. Whereas this, and you still have to be there for 10 minutes. Like, this is really interesting because it does mean that if you have that one person in your party that doesn't need to take a short rest, but your party needs to get from point A to point B, and that's going to take you 15 minutes to get there, you have one party member that's the runner, and everyone hops in the bottle, gets a 10-minute short rest while you're on the run.
Yeah.
And that is a different dynamic than I think the other kind of alternative short rest options that exist out there.
Yeah. So with the fly speed, with the short rest on a stick, plus the shenanigans that are potentially there, the limited
and the wishes, like I think it's got to be S tier.
I'm willing to push it in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's give it the S.
Yeah. I think that you could do things with this that you certainly cannot do as a Hexblade.
Yeah.
You're definitely more of a caster, but I think that this really is super strong.
I think there have been S tiers that we've handed out with the idea that for a player who is very creative, they can do a lot with it. And I think this is one of those subclasses.
Yes.
That a creative player who's thinking a little bit outside the box, or the Genie vessel, can really make some awesome things happen at the table. And I think that's worthy of an S tier.
We asked our community as well what they thought of these new subclasses for the Warlock. We got over 6,000 responses to our community poll. Let's see what they said.
So with the Fathomless, 8.9% gave it the S tier, with 34.9% giving it A, 43.1% giving it B, 11.4% giving it C, and barely anybody gave it a D tier. I do think it's interesting that I really like the Fathomless. I think that it is easily an A tier. The community definitely leaned into the B tier. And although I feel like that's where I was sitting at the start of this, I feel like I just like it too much to put it there. I do think that a lot of people look at this and say it's going to only be good in a nautical themed campaign, but I actually think it has a lot more to offer than just that.
Yeah, give it a second look. I mean, a B is a respectable ranking, and I think definitely acknowledges the fact that a B ranking is S tier in the right campaign. And this is a clear case where if you do have a heavy aquatic focus to your campaign, it does rocket up.
Yeah.
So there is a justification for giving it a B, I think. The Genie, on the other hand, 37.6% gave it an S tier ranking, with 40.8% giving it an A, 17.3% gave it a B, and 3.7% gave it a C, with, again, just a sliver of D tier rankings, less than 30 people out of 6,000 polled. Very clearly, lots of people gave this an A or higher ranking overall, with basically 77% giving it A or higher. So it's an A plus low S, if you're looking at that, like from the community very clearly.
Yeah, the community landed majority in the A, but we can't ignore how big of an S tier ranking this got. And really, we had the same discussion. Is it an A plus or a low S? And I think it does ride that line. And I do think that there's a lot to be offered here, and I think the community's absolutely right with the way that this split out.
Yeah. I think that it's valid to look at these new subclasses and go, well, neither of these are the Hexblade. They don't feel as game-changing for the Warlock, certainly, as that did. But I think that with the new invocations, the new options for Warlocks, the expanded spell lists and everything like this, I think that these are really top-tier offerings and worth considering, especially if you don't want to just fall into the cookie cutter Hexblade pattern.
Absolutely. I think that both of these offer a really compelling play style and something that feels fresh and unique for the Warlock. Up on screen right now, you're going to see our final rankings for all of the Warlock subclasses. Next to that, you're going to see all of the community rankings for the Warlock subclasses. I think Warlocks are awesome, and I think these two new additions really stand out to me as ones that I would definitely look at playing in the future.
If you doubted the Warlock early on in 5th edition and thought, I looked at those subclasses, didn't really like them, I don't really want to do the Gish thing with the Hexblade, give these a second look and look at all the options. I think you'll be much more excited about playing a Warlock than you might have before. I think they've really come into their own.
So this has been a look at the Warlock subclass tier ranking part 3 in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Tell us about your thoughts on these two subclasses below.
The videos that we create on our channel are made possible thanks to the incredible generosity of our Patreon supporters. If you enjoy the work that we do here on YouTube, please check us out by following the links in the description below to join our Patreon community.
And don't forget to check out our live play Shadows of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we have plenty more tier ranking videos for the classes in D&D 5e right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time
in the dungeon.